Hey everyone, welcome back to Frontrow2020. I'm Ryan Hayward and your host of Frontrow2020. I'm also the CEO and founder of Pitchproof, the whole organization pulling this virtual conference together. So today I'm super excited because we're going to be joined by Stef, who I'll give you guys a quick introduction to in a second. But I just want to run over a couple of things like I'm doing at the start of each session. Number one is if you're going to be taking photos or videos or anything during this workshop that you want to share on social, make sure you do that. Use the hashtag Frontrow2020. We'd love to see you guys engaging with our content. And if you've been following our Instagram stories recently, you've seen that we're basically reposting as many people as we can. We've already had like 300 people send us photos and selfies of them watching. That's really cool to see. And also you can tag us at Pitchproof as well. A huge thanks to our sponsors. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. So Adobe XD and Holobrief, which we'll be talking about Holobrief a fair bit in this presentation, I think, with Stef, because they've kind of collaborated together to put this presentation together. But links in the bio and in the description will be for them. You can also join our community Slack channel. That's where you can network with other event attendees, get automatic reminders that we'll be sending out before every session, as well as some exclusive other goodies. We also have our virtual expo, which is new to Front Row this year, where we've got a bunch of different exclusive discounts. We've got a massive deal going on with design cuts at the moment, where you guys can get access to like hundreds of really high quality and best selling design products for like 50% off. So definitely go check that one out. And also if you guys want to rewatch sessions, or if you miss a session and you want to catch up, or if you want access to our mentoring sessions or a bunch of other exclusive goodies, you need our VIP pass. So you can actually check the links in the description if you don't have a VIP pass yet. It's definitely worth the money. All right, so today we are joined by Stef Hamerlinck. Stef is the host of the Let's Talk Branding podcast, and he's also a founder of Studio Ollie, and he's also a speaker. So we're super excited to have him. He's going to be presenting a bit of a workshop and a talk about diving deep into brand strategies. So Stef, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm excited for this.
So
It's
am
kind
I.
of
I've like
funny
very
being in the
briefly
TV
looked through your
studio, but
presentation, but what I've just like seen from it, there's a lot of golden nuggets in here. So I'm super excited for my audience and attendees to actually go through this presentation with you, because I'm sure they'll find it valuable. And for anyone who is watching, you've probably seen over the past couple of days ago, yeah, we put out a form, a couple of links to a form that actually Steph created, whether it was a type form one or a video ask one. And we actually got some results from that survey, and I believe they're in this presentation, right, Steph?
yeah, well, actually, I'll be showing them live on the actual tool, so we
That's
can
awesome.
just watch as I would do it in a real life
That's
situation.
awesome. That's awesome. I believe a bit of front row gets some brand strategy in this one too.
Yeah, for free, man.
I'm excited. This is what you guys need to do. You need to create virtual conferences so you can get brand strategy for free from Steph.
Exactly, exactly. It's a smart
uh,
move.
yeah. If you're happy to take it away, I'm happy to sit back because I'm going to definitely be taking some notes during this one.
Awesome. Well, hello everyone. Excited to be here. And so I want to talk not only just about brand strategy, but specifically about the power of research in brand strategy. Because I believe brand strategy, once you start doing research, it gets a lot more powerful than just asking the right questions. That's only one part of strategy, but really doing that research makes all the difference. And I want to take you through some of the tools, the ways of thinking today to actually how to actually do research, because there's a lot to it, of course. But before we dive into that whole geeky part, just a little bit about me. So I'm Stef Hamerlinck. I co-founded Ollie, which is a brand experience studio in Belgium. Um, Also founded Let's Talk Branding, which is like a podcast among some other things. It's also courses and some other stuff, but mainly the podcast is my journey in learning more about brand strategy and branding in general. So go check that out if you want to. Not right now. Uh, Skateboarding. I love skateboarding. Actually, I had a big accident, so I'm kind of like in a rehab right now. Still working on the knee, but hopefully one day they'll be back. Soon to be dad, actually in a couple of weeks, so that's also very exciting to me. And I'm actually a designer turned strategist. So the first, like, let's say 5 years ish of my career were mainly focused on doing a lot of design stuff, and then I gradually evolved into becoming a strategist. Yeah, my mantra is kind of like solving bigger problems. That's what I really believe in. I always try to look at like the root cause, like what's causing this, and research is a way of actually finding that out. So solving bigger problems is a big part of what I love to do. In this workshop, we're going to be talking a little bit about just the basic definitions, because we do need to have some common understanding of what I mean when I mean brand strategy, because as we all know, brand can get a little bit fluffy. And so I want to define that. Why we should do research, what are the benefits of research, then, of course, some research methods. And then there's a little model I'd like to introduce, which is called the three C's. And we're going to be talking about that. It's just an easy way of thinking about research. And then we're going to do some like live brand strategy for Frontrow. So I hope that's going to be interesting for you. And of course, I hope I can do some Q&A at the end, because I can imagine some questions will pop up. Let's dive in. So first, what is brand strategy? It's important to know. So brand strategy, this is my own definition, by the way. Brand strategy is a platform that bridges business strategy with branding and marketing. And so there's a couple of aspects to this definition. So first, it's a platform, means it's a foundation, it's an approach, it's a perspective. It's not the actual tactics. It's not branding or marketing, for example. So brand strategy is not branding. It's a platform for branding and marketing. And of course, it bridges, meaning it's a back and forth communication. It's not top down. So it's not just brand strategy telling branding what to do and marketing what to do. It's also the other way around. Marketing and branding informs brand strategy. And so there's this relation. And so that all is powered by business strategy, of course, which is like the layer on top of that. And so business strategy is a lot of things. I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's really about understanding what resources you have as a company and mobilizing those for the right opportunities, or maybe making things more effective, making things more cost effective. So all of these things are more related to business strategy, but they get blended in with with brand strategy a lot, of course. And so branding, also a word that is thrown around a lot, like what does branding really mean? I have a definition on this as well. It's quite an elaborate definition, but I like to get down really like to the core of what it is. And so for me, the discipline of branding is a deliberate, continuous process of developing observable, distinctive assets associated with a product or service. I think the key thing here, without going too deep, because I have videos on that if you would like to see more about what I mean with this definition, is distinctive brand assets. I think that's key to branding. And so these can be a lot of things. These can be like logos, mascots, typography, messages, tone of voice, people, sound, texture, smell. All of these assets that are linked to that product or service is part of what we do as branding experts. We develop those assets. And I think that's a great way. And it's really valuable to companies, because these assets, when people see them or hear them or smell them, they immediately associate the brand. So it's really important. Marketing, also a really broad discipline. A lot of people say that marketing and branding are the same. I don't believe that. Actually, marketing is about the four P's. It's a very traditional theory, but I really like it. It's about what kind of product, it's about what place are you just selling the product. So is that online, offline, where online, offline? It's about promotion, so making sure people know your product exists. And then it's about price, so making sure you have the right price to do that. So marketing is a really broad discipline. And so in an ideal world, this happens where you have business strategy informing brand strategy, and then that informs marketing and branding, who also like inform each other. And of course, that goes back up the chain. And so I think this is a great way of looking at what brand strategy can be. For most designers, they start out with branding, and then they start learning about brand strategy. And it's mainly in the role of doing better branding efforts, which is perfectly fine. I think it's a great way to do better discoveries and to get better at branding, to understand what a brand is. But at a certain point, you start leveling up and you start really looking at brand strategy as a foundation for marketing and branding. And it becomes a little bit more broader, which is, I think, a really interesting step, but it's not for everyone, of course. Okay, so why should we research? in a normal like client approach, there's the client's assumptions about what he needs, and he comes to you. And if you're somewhat of a decent designer or like experienced designer, you may be challenging him a little bit about what he really needs. Like maybe a logo is not your perfect solution. Maybe you need a full identity, or maybe your website doesn't need changing, but you need something else. And so between those two, there is something that exists, and that's what we like to call the brief. It's something that starts to grow once you start talking to each other. Of course, there's also situations where you just get a brief and you can't challenge that. That's probably the worst situation, but I don't even want to talk about that because I think that's another level. But this is what we usually do when we are somewhat evolving in our design business, which is already a good starting point. But I think what makes it a more strategic approach is actually where you have the client's assumptions, you have your assumptions, and then you have external information, meaning information, data that lives outside of the organization and also outside of your knowledge. And so the idea is to do research and to uncover that information, and then you can create a strategy. And so you can see, for example, you might already have knowledge of external information and you need to share that with your clients. And then your client might also have a lot of data, which they need to uncover to you to understand. And if you bring all those elements together, you get a decent strategy. And so my favorite like definition on just strategy in general, because strategy is a word that can be used for anything from business strategy to, I don't know, marriage strategy, if somebody does that. No, seriously, strategy is an informed opinion about how to win. I think this captures the essence of what strategy is about. And so there's two important words here. Well, actually, three. It's informed, meaning that's the research part. We need to inform ourselves to have that opinion about how to win. But it's still an opinion. So even though we do a lot of research, it's still subjective, it's still a perspective on things. It's not scientific, at least not in a way that a doctor can say, well, we saw in your blood sample that you have this problem and you need this solution. It's not like that. It's an informed opinion. And it's, of course, always about winning. I mean, I don't think there's people doing strategy to make people lose. Maybe you can do it to lose a battle, but lose the war, win the war. But still, let's not get into that. It's not time for Sun Tzu quotes. Okay, benefits of doing research. So first off, I think in general, with anything you do in terms of like being more strategic, you build trust. So your clients start trusting you a lot more because they can see it's not just about your opinion. So you remove that subjectivity, not entirely, as I said before. It's still like an informed opinion, but a lot of subjectivity can be challenged because you said like, okay, it's this is not just me, it's something that's shown by, for example, we asked 100 people and they said this is the truth. So at least you have a little bit more backing to what you're saying, and they will trust your opinion more. And of course, research creates a lot of value. You give an organization like insights that they didn't have before, insights about maybe their customers, about their competition. This can be almost any kind of insights, but that can create a lot of value because that can help them create better marketing, help them create better products, even help them evolve their business model. Like it's so valuable what you can do with this type of research, which is crazy. I've seen that with a lot of clients, and they've told me that this research part really was really valuable for them. And of course, for you on the long run, you get a deeper understanding of the drivers of success, meaning if you do multiple projects and multiple research phases, you'll start to see more patterns and you'll start to recognize what works and what doesn't work and how consumers think. And this is really powerful because it makes you more of an expert, and you can see beyond like one category what is working and what not. And so knowledge is power, of course. And maybe another Spider-Man quote with great power comes great responsibility. So that's also important. Not really right now. Okay, sorry. Research methods. So let's dive into a couple of things, like just to understand um, what types of research are there, because research again is like a really vague word. It's just like we can do any type of research, but let's dive into a couple of aspects of that. So first, I think a very important distinction is between quantitative and qualitative research. Without getting too scientific on you, quantitative research is a more objective approach. It's usually about bigger numbers, statistics. It's, for example, doing surveys or looking at trend reports. It's this type of data you have where you have actual numbers and you can create graphs out of that. It's measurable. There's some kind of proof. Of course, you can still create that proof from thin air, and a lot of trend reports are actually bullshit. But okay, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. Actually, Ryan, sorry.
That's more than fine with us.
Okay.
It's in context.
Beep. Okay. Go deeper with qualitative. So if you have quantitative research, very good, but always build on that with qualitative research. And what is qualitative research? It's more subjective. It's more about gut feeling. It's more about human interaction. Usually those are things like interviews, focus groups, or just observing what's happening, experiencing the product, all these types of things. But that's really important. You can't just lean on quantitative research and say this survey tells us what's happening. But if you don't find that same thing in interviews, maybe it's just something you did wrong kind of data gathering, or the survey wasn't done right, or the data wasn't right. I mean, there's a lot of things, but always back up with qualitative research. And again, you can verify that qualitative research with quantitative research. Doing one interview and basing your whole brand strategy on that is also maybe a bit dangerous. So again, look back at, can I find this similar insight in the quantitative research? And so a couple of methods within the spectrum, for example, observation. I think it sounds a bit dumb because actually it's just like experiencing your client's product or service. I mean, it's almost logical we should do this, but we do tend to forget this actually. So get out there. If it's a restaurant, go eat there. If it's a product, use it in some way. Try to imagine. I know it's not always possible if it's like some kind of B2B product, which you are not the user for, but always try to imagine as much as possible. Try to observe what's there. And also, when you are observing, really make notes and look for behavior. I think that's really interesting. When you're observing, really like just let the situation or whatever comes to mind, just write these things down. And often you can reflect that back on your client and tell him like a couple of things you felt throughout the experience. And they will really appreciate that because, again, you took the time to really look at their product or service and try to understand it. And that's important. Another big method, I use this a lot. I think it was like the key turning point for me, actually, workshops, brand workshops specifically. But so workshops are a great way to get a better understanding. It's very collaborative. So it's together with your client or with your team. I usually try to do it as much with my clients as possible. And so you try to get the whole stakeholder team in a workshop, but specifically on brand workshops, there's a lot of information out there, but you can do that for anything. And so a workshop allows you a little bit to get out of the box, out of the daily workings, and it's really like this free space for thinking and for brainstorming. So what you do in a workshop is you facilitate, meaning you get as much information out of your client as possible. You make it easy for them to bring up information they didn't think before, and you make it easy for them to do some like blue sky thinking. Where do we want to go? Where do we want to be? So these workshops are really a place to go a little bit further than what's there today, because usually clients are a little bit stuck in the day-to-day work, which is a great method to uncover. And again, this is qualitative research, of course, and I usually start every project with a workshop, which is a great way to build some initial trust. Desktop research can be anything. Just Googling stuff is desktop research. So this might sound a little bit more fancy than it is. But what you can do is like you're looking for competitors. You're Googling their names, you're Googling the category, you're looking at their websites, you're writing down stuff, you're maybe making a little bit of a case study, you're doing an audit. What kind of social media is there? What kind of messaging is there? What kind of visual codes are out there? All of this stuff belongs in this realm of desktop research, which is usually what most people are doing. They're sitting behind a computer and doing research. But again, it's not the only method. But it's a great way to get like a more macro understanding. For example, if you're looking at like trend reports and all that stuff, that can be interesting to see where an industry in general is evolving. And so how your company is going to work within that is really interesting. And again, you can use it to validate insights you got from interviews, for example. And also, Google Trends, for example, is a great tool, actually. Just look at like what was the frequency of people looking, for example, for, let's say, if it's front row, how many people were looking for online design conferences, for example, and is there like a rise in the amount of searches? This is really interesting information, because it's not about people saying what they're going to do, it's about their actual behavior. The fact that they are already typing in these words means there is a need, and so you can have a solution for that. So I think Google Trends is a great way to start looking at customer needs. Surveys, I will be looking at one later today. Interesting because it's specific to your problem. You can get like bespoke data. It's not just a trend report by some other market research agency. It's really something you can do, and you can do it quite easily. I mean, it's not like you need millions of dollars. I think a lot of people are afraid when you say market research. They, okay, we can't do this, it's too much, we don't have the resources for it. Using tools like Typeform and just asking around, you can get a lot of like interesting data. Again, it's not going to be data that's going to be supportive enough for like doing a whole, I don't know, societal change or something big, but for your company specific can be really interesting. And so one important note when it comes to surveys is that we can't predict behavior. Why? Because when you ask somebody something, it's usually not the best indicator of future behavior. Humans are actually really bad at like predicting their own behavior. So if you ask somebody, would you pay $2,000 for Frontrow 2021? And they say, and 90% says yes, that doesn't mean that 90% will buy tickets for $2,000 next year. Would be nice, but it's dangerous because again,
Would be very
people
nice.
are really bad at knowing if this is true. So I'm sorry, Ryan, it's not enough. No, but it's something we need to consider. But we can look at sentiment. So how are people feeling about certain things? Like what are they leaning towards, and like how do they feel about these things? These are things we can do with surveys, but always be mindful that people are really bad at predicting their own behavior. Okay, so we're down to the 3C model, which is just a way of looking at data and making sure you have some kind of structure to go on. And it's based on three fundamental aspects of a brand. So the company, so the organization and everything in it, the customer, or sometimes people say consumer. There's a bit of a distinction. Customer is the one buying, consumer is the one using. It's not always the same, but I'd like to talk about customer here because it's a little bit more relevant. And then competition, all the brands that are out there doing similar things, that's the competition. A brand never lives in a vacuum. It's not true. People are looking at different brands, they're interacting with it. So always make sure you have an understanding of competition. And so we can see here in again another Venn diagram, probably just strategist thing to put everything in Venn diagrams. I'm sorry for that. But you can see here, like we have these three circles, and there's of course overlaps between those. Between a company and a customer, there's a reputation. Between the competition between the other brands and the customers, there's actually what we like to call the category. So it's like how people think about the industry in general and how they think about all these brands within. And then between a company and the competition, it's how you're going to position yourself. And of course, all of these things together make for an informed strategy. And so a couple of things just to show you what goes under these different C's. So under a company, you can do things like SWOT, which is just strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's just a great way to list like what is this company good at, bad at, what's coming at them. And so that's a great way to understand some of the internal forces. Vision, mission, purpose, values. There's a lot of ways we call this, and in brand strategy, these things are very popular at the moment. But again, it's really about understanding what's driving this organization forward. Some people like to refer it as like the why, Simon Sinek's why. These are a lot of things, but it's really getting to understand that company. And then the customer, understanding their needs, their behavior, maybe segmentation. That's when you start looking at different segments within a target audience. For example, we might look at the audience for front row as maybe people that are interested in branding, but maybe UX people have a different type of need. Not saying it is true, but that could be two segments which need to be marketed a little bit different. But always make sure that the brand has like the message that works for everyone, but you can get into segmentation. Culture, psychological, that those are all of things, demographics, those are all things that go under customer. And then competition, yeah, the competitors, what kind of messages are out there, how are they distinctive, how are they looking, like what is their own kind of styles, what are evolutions in the category in general, what are maybe category cliches. In some industries these are really powerful, and it's really interesting to play around with those. Once you uncover them, you actually get like a head start on other brands that don't know that they're actually doing the cliche thing. So what are we looking for when we're researching? We're looking for insights, we're looking for understanding, we're looking for patterns, we're looking for problems, we're looking for opportunities, and of course we're looking for clarity. I mean, at the end of the day, there's so much research you can do, but you need to boil it down to simple concepts, and you need to translate it into something that's actionable. So that's what the end goes. And so an insight, we talk about that a lot in brand strategy, is an unspoken human truth, which is a really great way of looking at it, because an insight is something you find that isn't talked about that often. And it's often something like really interesting. And when you tell people, they're like, oh yeah, that's true. And you can really work with that. You can build a brand on that because it's something that other brands weren't working on before. So this type of thing is really what we like to call an insight. This is the brand spectrum. It's just an interesting way to look at like all the things that are in brand strategy and in branding. And then what I like about it is that it's like it's converging and then diverging again. And so if we look at actually research, that's just like the first part on the left, where you can see a lot of things like brand audits, mission, vision. Usually this is one way of looking at it, but I do like the idea of like going broad, researching a lot of things, and then you get in like articulation, clarification, and then you get in like positioning, differentiation. You make it really small, like really narrow what it is about, and then you get broader again. You start working on the brand and marketing and so on. So I think this is a great way of looking at it. Let me just take a sip of water. Going fast. I want to show some real stuff, so that's
So
why
much
I'm going.
value so far.
Voila.
And also, real quick, anyone who's watching in chat, I see a few questions coming in, but use exclamation mark Q and then type your question, and then we'll be able to see it on my iPad here so I can ask Stef.
Awesome. Yeah. Looking forward to those questions, definitely. But let's get in like the case study, front row. I mean, it's going to be a little bit more, maybe Ryan, you can answer some questions if needed. But so what would we fictionally do if we were to do like a brand strategy research phase for front row? There's a lot of things we need to do. So when we think about the three C's, we would first need to look at the company. We need to define what's the business problem, because Ryan is not going to hire me just for fun because everything is going well. Then he would just probably do another edition. But usually there's a problem, or at least there's a need or an opportunity or something why they want to hire a brand strategist or a branding team to do something, because he knows we need to step up the game, we need to change something. And so that's something we would definitely do. Then, of course, we would need to do workshops with Ryan and his team. We would need to do stakeholder interviews. So those are individual interviews with people from management. I don't know if there's like a whole management team, Ryan, but
I mean, we're a fairly small team. I think I'm mostly management and operations as well as one other bloke.
yeah, but I mean, you would need to talk to anyone involved with PitchProof or with Front Row, because it is important to understand, even like if it's a big company, even people that are in customer support are really interesting to talk to, because they are like day in, day out talking to customers. And so it's not just about that top layer, it's about making sure you understand everyone in the organization. Of course, we would need to do some desktop research. We would need to understand like what were the previous editions of Front Row like, look at the different types of feedback they got, look at the, I don't know, the kind of styles, the kind of everything that's involved in like the history of Front Row so far would be important. We would need to look at messaging at the different touch points, social media, and so forth. We also would probably do some expert interviews, which is like we could ask, for example, in this case, the teachers or the speakers to give their vision on Front Row, because that's also very interesting. Of course, I always try to look for some kind of industry experts, because they often have like a little bit of a different view than for example the people within the company. So that's also something, and we're actually going to look at that later. And then for the competition, we need to understand the competitive environment, we need to define the category. this is already like an interesting one for front row. Like, what would you describe as being the category, Ryan?
The category would be virtual events.
Yeah, virtual events. So
Yeah,
you
virtual
see, I
conference.
wrote down I wrote down like online between brackets design
Yeah.
conferences, because it's like it's because you could say we're in competition with, for example, all conferences. You could also say we're in competition with all types of design education. There's a lot of perspectives you could look at, like this kind of thing. But it's something we'll get back later to. Of course, you would need to research a category, understand who the competitors are. You can get that from your client, but also do your own research to make sure there's maybe competitors the client didn't look at. Then you would need to do some case studies, like maybe list some typical kind of competitors, big, small, in between, that sort of stuff. Competitor mapping, we're going to look at that later. Some category truths, and then we need to look at the customer. But we'll get into that specifically. And so, for example, let's define the business problem. This is fictional, guys, so it's not an actual problem for front row. I just invented it. So let's say Ryan wants to generate more income from paid visitors like next year, because maybe that's a way of looking. Maybe that's an opportunity from a business perspective that isn't explored yet. I don't know if it would be true, Ryan, but when, of course, when Ryan tells me, for example, yeah, you know what, I really need more, I want more paid visitors next year, so we want to up that value and make more of an interactive thing about that, we can also challenge the business problem. That's already a starting point for you. Don't just accept any, that if you remember like the client's assumptions and your assumptions, you can already start challenging that. For example, maybe it's better to get more sponsorship deals, or more high value sponsorship deals. Maybe it's about getting advertisers or more advertisers on board. Maybe we need to sell products. Maybe we need to sell merch. What are other ways we can tackle this business problem? And again, what's the bigger problem? Maybe it's not about generating more income from paid visitors, but let's suppose this is a good business problem and let's run with it for a while. But I'm just trying to already give you some ideas on how you need to work with this type of thing. Expert interviews, I'm going to try to pick a couple of things out of the roadmap because it's too much to do it all. So I did a couple of interviews with the teachers, with the speakers. And again, my main idea was trying to understand like what is the most effective way for people to learn and to improve their skills and their design careers, because I think that's probably what Front Row is all about. It's about helping designers get better. And so I wanted to learn a bit more about how these teachers look at that. And so I have a couple of videos for you. I hope the audio works. Give me a hint if it doesn't. Personally, I found it to be, being super transparent, super open, talking through people with my failures, how I messed up. So I think that's way more relatable. And yeah, there's just so one, for example, this snippet is answered by one of the speakers. I actually used Video Ask for this, which is a really interesting tool by Typeform. Like, imagine you're presenting your brand strategy and you're putting these snippets in between to make like the whole research come alive a little bit more. This is a great way to do that, because just showing like data and quotes is not always like very lively. And so, for example, here it's about relatability and honesty. That's already a cue we can take away towards the messaging for next year. Like, we know we want teachers to be really relatable and on that level to make it really effective.
I'd say using video and actually showing them through a tutorial. It just helps them to, guide them through, and really just shows the step by step. And I find that a lot of students need that hand holding. So using video is the best tool.
So again, here, an important note about video, which is already, of course, what Front Row is using right now, but it's also about showing them how to do it, guiding them through. This is an interesting aspect. Like, we could think about next year, Front Row, like how could we make it even more interactive? Like, how could we actually guide people through?
Most success in terms of like sharing knowledge and engaging with my students or people who want to learn from my experience, it has always been by achieving like the breaking the difference that initially is perceived between a teacher and a student. So usually teachers seem like this because they have more experience, and students feel like this. So every time I achieve, breaking that difference and being just one more, and helping them understand that we're all learning together and we're just sharing experiences, this is when I actually see more engagement, and actually we can get into more personal conversations, and they open up more about.
So Alex Antolino, great guy, of course. You've seen him yesterday, right? He talks about, again, breaking this barrier, getting personal. And you can start to see like there's maybe already a little bit of a team here. It's like being very relatable, getting close to your students. So you can already feel something that's really interesting. And so this can hint actually at like a brand essence. And here's Tom.
Hey, Stef, great question. From my experience and with my students, people learn by doing the most. So just giving them vague theory, which is not applicable, is not the best way. I find the best way is deeply listening and understanding what they're going through and their problems, and then working with them to actually get execution, get action.
So again, Tom mentions a really important part here, which is people learn by doing. So this is a really interesting hint, again, because we can already start to feel this going a certain direction, which is really interesting. And we know that these type of teachers want to interact with their students that way, which is also really interesting. And so again, like I'm not showing you an actual brand strategy presentation, but this would be a great way in terms of qualitative research to bring that proposition alive. And so let's do some competitor mapping. We're going to use HolaBrief for this. HolaBrief, amazing guys. I think Fernando and Leticia and their team are probably in the chat somewhere. But check out HolaBrief. It's like a platform where you go together with your clients to do creative briefings. It's a great way to actually get your strategy going. There's a lot of exercises here, so such as like there's questions to ask, there's competitor mapping, there's positioning mapping, all of these things to help you and your client get on the same page. So it's a really great tool. And so for right now, we're just going to do one exercise, which is a competitor mapping. So Ryan, like who are the competitors for Frontrow? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, well, one off the top of my head was, I believe there's one by DesignX, and they were called Remote Design Week, and they held one back in May or June or something. Super cool guys though. But I guess that was a competitive virtual design conference. If we want to look at actual more in-person events, there's things like Adobe Max, Creative South, just to name a few off the top of my head. Maybe you can.
There was like also, I think it's what Creatives Ignite.
Oh yeah, Creatives Ignite is one that I've
not
seen
so long ago
popping off a little bit.
Yep. And then like maybe a little bit further, things like the future, especially when you think back at the business problem, which was about we want more paid customers. Then we're also getting in the field of like courses, online courses, because it's like people only have a limited amount of spend on education, and they need to be choosing. So we type in these competitors, and we start looking at like in these circles, which is like direct competitors, indirect competitors, and brands to look out for. The direct competitors, those are usually the ones that are really within the specific category. So as Ryan mentioned, like virtual conferences or events, those are usually the things that you put in there. Let's say like maybe Adobe Max actually has like an online version, I think, this year. And of course, with the whole COVID crisis, I think there's going to be a lot of offline conferences going online. So there's probably going to be an increase in competitors, which is not a bad thing, but it's just something we need to consider. And then maybe we can put in like indirect competitors, or maybe things like the future, because they are possibly taking a part of the revenue stream from Frontrow, but they're not like in the direct competitors because people don't see them as like an online conferences, which is like a different thing. Maybe like, let's say like Skillshare, Udemy, there's a lot of like more course related stuff that we could put in like the secondary ring. And then brands to look out for, those are things like where you suspect or you've seen like similar moves they did in the past, where you can think like maybe they will in the future also do this type of thing. So maybe like Envision or other brands might be like looking at doing more virtual conferences. So it's something you could watch out for. but they are not currently like as competitors. And so you can start to see like this competitor map is a really interesting way to look at the field, because you know like what are other brands are there and like how are they competing with us. And you could get into like positioning mapping, which is a more specific way of doing this kind of thing, where you actually, for example, you list a lot of competitors, but you actually do it on axes. For example, we might have an axis which is like the one on the one hand you have like more one-way kind of conferences where it's just talks and no interaction, and then the other hand you have really interactive kind of conferences, and then you might have something like more experiential versus more informational, and you start mapping these kind of competitors on there, and then you can actually like put the thing where you are right now and where you want to go. But I don't want to get too crazy in this exercise, because there's a lot more to it. And actually, if you look at Hola Brief, if you want like information about these actual exercises, wow, who's there? There's like a whole bunch of video tutorials inside of Hola Brief. I did this together with them a while ago. And so it's really like, if you want that education, it's just right there. So voila, that was Hola Brief. Let's get back. So another great way of looking at, so that was the competition part, and now we're looking at the customer C. So surveying students will of course be a great way to get some understanding of like, what is this all about? And so we can of course look at, let's see the type form. I have it right here. So we had 128 responses, which is okay. I mean, I would rather have like a little bit more in terms of like the sample size, because you need to imagine like, what's the total population of let's say creatives or designers? More in the millions probably. So 128 is like what percentage of that? So you know, in terms of representativeness of that sample size, it's not that big. On the other hand, it is 128 opinions. It's not nothing. It's not one or two. It's not just an interview. So it's still something we could work with. But if this would be like an actual brand strategy project, I would probably try and press for a little bit more. But again, we did this survey, and we also added an incentive, which was a VIP ticket for Frontrow. This is also a great way to get more people engaged in doing a survey, because it's not always that easy to ask people for their time, of course. But let's look at like some of the things that came out of this survey. So we can already see like in terms of like seniority, it's a good mix between meteor, junior, and senior, which is nice, because if it would be like 80% or 90% just senior, then we know we have some kind of segment from the industry, but it maybe wouldn't be representative for younger designers. So it's always a great way to get to know a little bit about who's answering your questions, and make sure they have kind of like a decent amount of representation. And we can also see that in terms of like, there's mainly a branding and graphic design audience, but also UX design is represented very nicely. It's almost like in thirds. And so marketing, of course, is less representative in this case, but this is actually good, because we know we're looking at designers. And if you actually would want to, you could actually like download this data and split, for example, by people in branding, or split by people in seniority levels, and look at that specific data to see if they have different opinions. But I don't want to get too deep, too geeky into that. So favorite types of learning, we see that again, that same insight from our speaker interviews, which he said like video is the best way. This actually gets confirmed by our quantitative data, because people say my favorite type of learning is actually video. And then the second is online courses, which is like a big category in this case. So it's actually probably the division between free video and paid video, right? But so we can already see that, of course, video and online courses are a big category when it comes to learning. And we can actually see like conferences and webinars are a bit lower, which is normal because it happens less. But there's an interesting insight we could get from this if we could like position Frontrow as like almost like a video course, but it's live. Maybe there is an interesting way, because people actually like online courses as a way of learning, but they see it as a different category. So that's something you could work on. The most effective way of learning, again, as Tom Ross said, you learn by doing. And again, this gets confirmed by a whopping 68%, 61% of the students saying like doing exercises is the best way, the most effective way of learning. And so interacting with their teacher is also important. But this is like a really good way, because again, you're what? Ryan is flying. Okay, let me see here. What else do we have? Yeah, and so this, for example, what are you looking to improve? It's like there's strategy, there's design, there's business, but this could be really inspiring for in terms of like, let's say we're thinking about Frontrow 2021, and we're thinking about what kind of topics would be on the top of people's mind. Well, here you actually have an interesting answer. People are really interested in strategy, which is why there are probably right now 10,000 people in the live stream. I don't know. Uh, and they're interested in design and they're interested in business. So we could already like start working on this as an insight. And then again, like, have you ever paid to learn something? This is good because we know people actually have already done this behavior in the past. So we know they're likely to pay for design education. It's just a way of how we frame that design education that will make them want to buy. And so you can see again, video courses are very easy for designers to buy, but paying for physical conferences or other types of conferences is a little bit harder for them because it's not learned behavior. So if we could frame like Frontrow as some kind of video course, but with the benefits of a physical course, we could make a physical conference. We could maybe position Frontrow as something really unique and get more people paying for education. And yeah, there are some other questions. I don't want to get into it because it might be interesting. You could get links to this and you can sift through it and just see for your own what are some interesting things. Just one more thing I wanted to mention is like reframing a question in a different way to make sure if people still answer the same thing is a good way of like double checking. For example, doing the work is another way of saying like learning by doing. And again, it gets like confirmed by this insight. So it's also always good to have like similar questions just to see if people weren't just randomly answering something. Okay, that was a Typeform survey. Let me get back to the presentation. And we have a winner. This is the winner for the VIP ticket. Thank you, Laura, for actually filling in the survey, and thank you everyone else, of course, for filling in the survey. Thank you for taking the time. You can get the results yourself and look at it if you want to.
That's awesome. And Laura, I will be emailing you shortly after this with login details for your VIP pass.
Awesome. Okay, so we're almost there, and hopefully we can get a couple of questions. And so putting it all together, the question is, do we see an overlap between these customer truths, category truths, and company truths? So what sticks out when we put these three C's together? And that is often the base for your brand purpose or essence or platform. There's a lot of synonyms for that. I don't want to get into it, but it's a really interesting starting point. So if you look at it this way, again, Venn diagram, here we go. On the left, we have the C, which is the company. It's like your superpowers. Like, what is Frontrow internally really good at? What makes Frontrow? What is it about the team that makes them very powerful? What is it about the customer? What do they need? What do they dream of? What do they want? And then maybe what's the competition? What does the competition suck at? And like, if we put all those things together, what makes our brand really stand out? And so for Frontrow, this is like, and again, it's imaginary, it's fictional. Frontrow would be maybe the team is like, it's all about connectivity. It's a small team. They want to really create this intimate experience. That's like part of who Ryan is and why he starts doing this thing. And then customers, they tell us like, we really want to learn by interacting and engaging. We really want to do that. So we know that. And then maybe we have seen throughout the competitive research that there's a lot of like online conferences that are really like boring, very cold, one-way communication. It's like Netflix, you're just watching them. But we know that learning by doing is actually the best way to do it. So we can see there's a proposition here based on what Frontrow is good at. And maybe that could be like the platform is like being at the front row of your own design future. It's like you're taking control of your own design future. It's about you being really close to your teachers. And so this kind of brand platform in the middle could inspire branding, could inspire marketing, could inspire new kind of products, new kind of formats, all that stuff. Voila, that was like the power of research and how to bring it all together. If you want to learn more about brand strategy, here's the shameless plug. Just visit branding.courses. And there's actually a 40% discount on all courses using Frontrow 2020. It's only valid for a few weeks, just so you can go take a look, ask me any questions if you want to. There's, of course, a million things you can learn for free. Let's talk branding.be. There's my podcast, which is like a lot of talks about all of this stuff. There's a resources page. There's articles. There's everything. And if you do want to use Holobrief, which is a really great tool, of course, you can get a 20% discount if you use the LTB code. But really, I think it's a great tool, so go check it out. And if you want to learn more, I also have a YouTube where I have videos about, for example, branding, brand strategy, all that stuff. Instagram, also some place where you can go, and then you can email me if you have any questions. And thank you so much, Ryan, for hosting this. It was really fun, and I hope people had some interesting takeaways.
Of course, of course. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was awesome, and especially the case study on Front Row. That was super exciting. So what we'll do, Steph, we're going to run to a minute ad from our friends at Holobrief, and then we'll get back. When we jump back in a minute time, we'll just answer some live Q&A questions for 5-10 minutes, and then we'll finish up there. So I'll let you have a quick drink in, because I know you've been talking for a while, so get your energy back, and we'll be back in like a minute or so, guys, with some questions from you guys.
Cool.
If you want to streamline your briefing process, you need to check out Holobrief. With Holobrief, you'll have all the information you need in one place, resulting in clear communication with your client throughout the entire design process. If you're like me, you know every single design project is different. Customize Holobrief to fit the needs and requirements of any client and their project goals. Build your brief from scratch or use a tailored template found on Holobrief to get all the information from your client. Get started today with Holobrief using the link in the chat. All right, we're back. What's going on? If you guys want to check out Holobrief, links are in the description and probably in the live chat too. All right, I've got a couple of questions here. Actually, I've got a ton of questions here, Steph. We've only got time for a couple. The first one I want to ask you is, and again, you guys, everybody at home, for this workshop or another one or another talk, just use !Q and then followed by your question. All right. I have heaps of questions coming in. Oh, which one are we going to ask you? All right, what would you say is the best way for someone to pivot into brand strategy? So if someone's just a branding designer, so they do logos and identity, what's the best way for them to pivot into branding, brand strategy?
Sure. Yeah, I think the best way is start doing brand workshops. It's quite easy to learn. I mean, you just need some questions on the wall and some post-its. And it's simple questions like, why are we here? Who are we here for? What makes us different? Actually, if you read the book Branding in 5.5 Steps by Michael Johnson, it's a great book. Just pick it up, pick those 6 questions, start doing some workshops, start asking some questions. And that would already like help you in getting a broader understanding of the brand and make your client feel like you are trying to get like more strategic approach. I think that's the best way. That's how I did it and how I started evolving. And then I started going from the workshop to doing more research.
That's awesome. All right, let's do a couple more questions here. Oh, there's too many to pick from.
We can do a follow-up session.
Yeah, we might need to, I'll tell you what. All right, how do you convince a prospect client looking for a logo that brand strategy is actually what they need?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. Well, I mean, it's actually all about not convincing them and asking them hard questions about their business. And again, it's about like what I said before, solving bigger problems. The moment you show them that maybe, for example, like make them think about, is the logo actually the thing that's going to drive the new business? Like, what are your expectations when you're coming to me? And you'll start to see, they'll maybe start, well, doubting themselves or start thinking about a broader perspective. And they'll start seeing you as the person that can help them bring that broader perspective. And of course, you still have that end of the service, like maybe we can create a new branding, but it's just like this really approach where you step back and you ask critical questions and you try not to convince them that actually what you're offering, your logo, is the best way forward. It's a bit counterintuitive, but it works. You'll see.
That's awesome. And the last question we have is, do you have any book recommendations?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
which one?
Branding in 5.5 Steps. I mean, it's just a great book. It learns a lot about brand strategy and like this more broader branding approach. Let's see, that's like more in like stepping stone book. Probably all books by Marty Neumeyer are really interesting when you're learning about branding. But then when you want to level up a little bit, I think a book like, for example, How Brands Grow is really interesting by Byron Sharp. It's an Australian guy, professor. It's a bit more critical of a lot of things in our industry, but that's like the level up. And I think more, let me just see, what's it called? Where is it? Damn it.
Got the full library.
Yeah. Eat Your Greens is a good one. And maybe one more. Where is it? Yeah. I shuffled my bookcase, so I don't know where it is. But any case, I mean, those books are already good to start. And on my website resources, there's like a 10,000 book list, so you'll get out of it.
That's right. So everybody watching, make sure you go check out Stef. Go chuck him a follow. Stef, thank you so much for joining us today and for your amazing talk. Like I said, people in chat, go follow him. It's definitely worth the follow and definitely worth checking out more of his content. So yeah, Stef, any final words?
Just thanks a lot for all the people. And if you want to talk more about brand strategy, just hit me up. Always happy to talk. And enjoy the rest of the conference. I think it's going to be great. And I'll be watching as well, of course.
I love it. It's so cool. So yeah, thank you for joining us, Stef, and thank you for everyone attending this session. A couple more things before we finish up, just to run through the schedule real quick. For the next few sessions, we'll get a little graphic going on screen here, hopefully in just a second. So upcoming sessions. So in a few hours time, we have a Q&A panel with a bunch of leading content creators in the creative space, people like Dave Taylor, Scott Lung, Dane Walker. We're talking about embracing social media to leverage your creative career. I'm super excited for that Q&A panel. And then later on, we have a workshop with Dane Walker, followed by another networking session for a few hours. And saying that, there's actually, in between a few of these sessions, we actually have some mentoring sessions for VIP ticket holders. So things, so some mentoring sessions with, I believe, like Jeremy Mura is coming up in a couple of hours time, and there's a few more goodies in terms of speakers too. So that's kind of it. Just a couple other things. A huge thanks to our sponsors, obviously Adobe XD and Holobrief, which Stef talked a little bit about in his presentation. So huge thanks to them. Again, you can check all their links in the description below. If you haven't, guys, go check out the Slack community. The virtual expo, heaps of goodies. If you want to rewatch this session, or maybe you've missed a session you want to catch up on, that's what our VIP pass is designed for. You also get access to our mentoring sessions, which I spoke about, which are coming up shortly. There's a ton of other goodies. Actually, VIPs, they can enter a form to actually be entered into the chance to win a 1-year subscription to Adobe Creative Cloud. So that's really cool too. So all that's in the link in the description. So yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. Make sure you share on social media any takeaways from this talk, photos, videos, whatever, and use the hashtag Frontrow2020 and tag us at PitchProof. You guys have been going mad with it and we absolutely love it. So keep that up. And obviously, lastly, I have to thank my amazing team. So Tom Bouquet, Matt Hayward, Ben Martin, Billy Wilson, Courtney Zudemar, Lawrence Digital for the animations, and Drop Music Branding for our amazing audio branding. That's it from me. Until next time, we'll see you later.
We're just looking at each other.